So there is this question among people who consider themselves to be on the spiritual journey. Is it better to use psychedelics or to just meditate? And I want to just give here a little bit of my insights into this question, and I hope I don't really come across as wanting to give you a fixed opinion on this, but rather a couple of points that I discovered for myself that you could reflect upon yourself when you make the decision if you should integrate the use of psychedelics into your journey or not. And to start out here with this question, and basically every question you encounter in the so-called spiritual journey, is to consider that there is no absolutely better point of view than any other point of view. So in the absolute sense, no perspective could be considered better or worse than any other perspective. The judgment you make about where you are right now in your understanding of reality is better or worse than any other understanding is created by you in a relative sense. So you might now look back on your life and say, oh, now my understanding is so much better than it was 5 years ago. That is a relative statement you are making, and you considering yourself to have to gain more knowledge, more insight, more understanding of what God is, what reality is in the future is just the same projection into the future of, okay, I consider my point of view right now to be somewhat less than my idea of what it could be. So you are creating the need for spiritual insights by projecting them onto what you're experiencing right now, by making a judgment about what you perceive to be right now. But consider that in the absolute sense, God is really not any more isn't valuing any state more than any other state, because he can't. That would be something that you have to do from within or from a limited perspective. So whether you consider yourself enlightened or not, from the absolute perspective, there is no difference. There's no difference in the most confused state, you could say, experiencing a very limited perspective of the whole, from the perspective where you seem to have the broadest view possible. In the absolute sense, there is actually no difference. And I made this introduction to this video because that points out the difference or the fundamental aspect of meditation that is so different from psychedelics, and where I find most of the arguments about whether you should use psychedelics or just focus on meditation comes from. It's actually this idea that creates the whole spiritual journey in the question, in the idea that somehow this perspective is lesser in some sense than any other perspective you imagine to be. That creates the unenlightened state. But then there's also the paradox that just by knowing this, just by understanding this, by hearing someone talking about it, it won't stop that search for you. It won't fix the underlying assumption in you that you somehow have to reach another state through meditation or psychedelics. And the difference here is that meditation is kind of the more direct approach to showing you that every state, no matter how little knowledge of the whole is contained in that perspective, is equally valuable to any other perspective where you might embody more holistic understanding. Why is that? In one sense, you could say, from the highest perspective, how would God know every part of itself, every possible incarnation, without also equally loving and valuing all the very limited perspectives where God doesn't know himself, where he is limited to maybe just experiencing whatever he's experiencing under a very different paradigm, where he thinks of himself to be not God, whatever form that may take. Whether then you think you are a human, an animal, any other object, an alien, whatever form you could take. And meditation takes you to that insight that everything, every perspective, no matter how little knowledge that perspective embodies, is coming from a deep sense of peace and not infinite love. There's a difference here. People say when you experience the psychedelic state, your feeling of appreciation, of love, and the emotion can get cranked up so much that it feels like it goes infinite. And I actually found that that's not what you want. In the end, it's even beyond infinite love what you want. It's the freedom from any particular state, and to be okay with any particular state, no matter if it contains infinite love or a very constricted form of love, or love disguised as hate. There is peace beyond all of that. And just in my experience, which is now close to 10 years of 1 or 2 hours, between 1 and 2 hours of meditative practice per day, I can tell you that there is a fundamental difference between psychedelics and meditation, which I've also experienced psychedelics. And meditation gradually takes you beyond any emotion, beyond the need for insight, for love, for understanding. Meditation kind of swallows the question by peace. It's not that you are, when you set out on the spiritual journey, you have questions in your mind. You want them answered. And the only way you know how to answer questions is with more conceptual knowledge, or maybe an experience. You want to inquire into what is love, what is my true nature, and you expect some experience. But the meditative path is, in my experience, it's different. While there will be and can be a lot of interesting experiences along the way, at some point you discover that none of those experiences ultimately take you to transcending every perspective. What does, however, help you in meditation to transcend that is somehow mysteriously, miraculously, over the years, you discover that there is something in every experience that is growing over time. And the only way I could describe it is it's not an emotion, it's not love, it is just peace. It is the peace of getting ever stronger connected to your true nature, you could call it consciousness, but really no word fits, no word can describe the true nature, but peaceful stillness is what comes to my mind when I'm in that, when I'm very deeply connected to that. And over the years, meditation grows that sense in you, that it's not about emotional states, but about the peace that lets you drop the question, that actually what you are looking for is not an answer to that question, but you understand that the question arose from your lack of connection to your true self. That the question was an expression of not being embodied peace, not being connected to your true self that is infinitely peaceful. And you weren't looking for any notion you had of being enlightened. That's not what you want. It's just how it expressed, how it knew to express itself through you. And then meditation takes you to the realization that you don't need to know, you don't need to experience anything particular. That just existing in whatever way you do, sitting on your couch like I do, walking outside in nature, going to work, doing work, caring for your family, whichever experience you are having, it will become more apparent in more situations that that is no less valuable than any notion you have of enlightenment, that any notion you have of needing to understand God, the world. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with, of course, don't take this too far, I would say, in the other direction where you say none of that's necessary then. I mean, if that really is your drive, then that's no less important for you than any other thing you do in your life. If you really like to go in your life on trips around the world, that's equally valuable as going on a trip using psychedelics. It's your innate drive to explore, and you can do that. But in my experience, if you lack the perspective, the direct experience that everything you're experiencing, every emotional state you're seeking is also coming from that peaceful ground, then you might get lost. And I also did get lost for quite a long time in searching these higher states in psychedelic experiences. While they are great to have, I mean, amazing experiences, you can come up with them for an infinite amount of time, infinite degree, infinite differences, infinite perspectives to explore. But it might distract you, I feel, from that actual goal, which is to discover your stillness, peaceful nature. And that's sweeter and more satisfying than any emotional state. At least that is my perspective and my experience. And while that is something that meditation can show you, I feel, in a more direct way, psychedelics also can show you this, but in a different way, in a different sense. When you have a deep psychedelic experience that's so extraordinary, so completely unfathomable, very different from your ordinary daily state of consciousness, that degree of difference is what can show you that the value of an experience is not in the degree of how extraordinary it is. But that's a subtle and difficult thing to realize when the experience is so extraordinary, and that can capture you and suck you in and make you feel like you have these great insights, and it feels so loving and pleasurable. You can get attached to that. But I had also the experience that when your experience gets so crazy in psychedelic states, that allows you, or that allows the experience of complete transcendence of any experience to happen. I know that sounds very paradoxical, but it is like it is such a different experience from what you normally know in your daily experience, that it can show you that consciousness isn't any particular experience, that it must be beyond any experience, because it's so no thing, it's so nothing, it's so empty that it can take every form. And then it might get you the insight that it's not about the experience you're having, that what you're actually looking for is that peaceful stillness beyond any experience. And so in that sense, psychedelics can do that too, but they can do it faster, but they can also not do it. You can get stuck on the level of experience for years with psychedelics, for many, many trips. You can analyze your ego death and all the experiences you have beyond that of pure love, pure light, emptiness, empty, like really seeing the emptiness of experience, the differences of concepts and experience. And while all of that is great and can help you in other ways, it can also distract you from what meditation is actually about, what the spiritual path is actually about, to transcend the need for any particular experience and to find the peace in all of them. And so again, I want to mention and make more clear that in the absolute sense, how would it even be possible to make any experience more valuable than another? You couldn't. You can only do that from one particular perspective. And then it's the question, is that particular perspective, including that view and opinion, is that more valuable than any other perspective? And then you're back to the absolute sense, where there is no way you could make any, however deluded it is, however unknowing the experience is, it is all part of the whole. It is all the absolute infinite manifestation. And from that perspective, no perspective is more valuable than another. While at the same time, for your particular perspective, with your interest in spirituality, it is probably more valuable to arrive at that perspective and having the need for spiritual development, growth, insight dropped and dissolved into peace, into your true nature. So it's a paradox and a paradox and a paradox. But that's just how it is. And so maybe you can take away from this video that neither taking psychedelics or not taking them is better in and of itself. It's still your decision. It's still your right to do it or not. And there's nobody who can tell you if it's right for you or not. You have to find that out for yourself. And at the same time, meditate. My experience clearly told me that whatever insight I had from psychedelics, I had to integrate, and the technique for that is meditation, is the turning back from experience, from any particular emotion to the origin of it all, to that empty nature that is inherently peaceful. And then see how your journey is not ended with an answer, but dissolved into that clear view to the ground of reality, that clear view on your true self. And it is dissolved through peace. And you can even try to imagine that right now, when you have this question in your mind that seems so necessary to be answered. And then really try to contemplate, go inward and see, in a quiet meditative session, contemplate, how would my need for having this question answered, how would it behave if my experience was truly peaceful? If I was truly at peace, would that question even be, if it arises, something that I would then go out and seek an answer for? Or if the question arises in complete peace, would it not just dissolve back into it? And that would be my answer? Contemplate that. And I think it will help you to decide if, when the question and the desire for a psychedelic experience arises, where it's coming from and where it dissolves back into the moment it ceases. And maybe it's not the case for you that it dissolves into peacefulness, and then paradoxically there is more work to do. There are layers and filters in your system that prevent you from having your whole experience arise out of peace, be peace, and fall back into this peaceful natural state. So yeah, that's my perspective on whether or not someone should take psychedelics. Of course, this is not a recommendation to take anything illegal. Check that with the laws of your country before you take anything, before you get yourself in trouble maybe. And so in the end, this is just more input for you to make your own decision. You always were and always have to make your own decisions, even though sometimes it seems that people have so much knowledge and can give you answers. You either take it as belief until you know, or you don't believe and may never know. So you always do have to make your own decisions, but make them consciously, I would suggest, and don't pretend like you got the answer to your question and the decision was made for you by someone else. That's just hiding how you make the decision and making the process unconscious. In that sense, here was my input. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and please leave me your comments down below, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.